Flourishing Unfiltered, the podcast for high achievers who seek a professional life that feels as good as it looks.
We talk about the unseen journey of struggles on the path to success that people rarely talk about.
I'm Karen Smith, positive psychology practitioner and leadership coach and consultant.
And I'm Dr. Micah Nyhouse, positive psychology and self-leadership speaker and consultant.
Before we begin today, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're recording. We pay our deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
As we share our stories today, we honour the rich tradition of storytelling that has been passed down through generations.
If you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a review. And with that, let's get started.
Thank you so much for tuning back in and welcome. I am so excited to introduce someone very special to you today, an absolutely incredible entrepreneur, but also powerhouse and a dear friend of mine, Petra Zink. With nearly 20 years experience in branding, marketing, communications and coaching, Petra has built an audience of over 30,000 professionals in the future of work and personal branding space. She's worked with 300 plus personal executive coaching clients, as well as over 5,000 high performers through corporate workshops, keynotes, and leadership training programs to increase their influence and trust beyond their title. Absolutely incredible if you think about those numbers. Petra's also a certified personal brand and digital strategist, a speaker, consultant to some of the biggest global brands. She's an author and podcast host of Trusted Authority, and she's been featured on Forbes.com, CEO Magazine, News.com.au, Marie Claire and Yahoo Finance, to name just a few. She's also the author of Trusted Authority, and Petra helps leaders thrive in the trust economy. She works with executives, entrepreneurs to establish themselves as go-to authorities in their fields and enhance their influence and build impactful relationships. Petra, I am so excited to have you on the show and being able to ask you all the hard questions we ask our guests. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honestly excited because I've loved what you guys do. So ta-da! I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting. Petra, your career is incredible, and I've watched you create program after program and become an author, book author, a speaker, going from stage to stage. It is amazing. You've got your own podcast on the go as well. You are always working, it seems. Working, exercising, taking your dog for a walk. You are always amongst people. I don't know, you do so much. And I always ask myself, how do you do that? I reckon you've got more hours in the day than everybody else.
Well, I should get a life.
I know. Well, I think you have a life too. That's the unfair part. But what I would love to know, well, I kind of know already, but what I would love you to tell our listeners is what inspired you to start your business and get started on this entrepreneurial journey, because you haven't always been on it. I know you've been employed in the past. How come you are where you are today?
By accident. Like, the one thing that I always said to my parents, because they're both entrepreneurs, I said, you know what, if I do anything, I do not ever want to run my own business. I've seen the highest highs and the lowest lows in my upbringing, and I said, I don't want that. I just want to climb the corporate career ladder, and then I'm rich, retire and die, and that's it for me.
Wow, that is so not what happened.
Not at all.
What happened?
Well, what happened was that I was always fascinated by what makes people purchase a product. I loved watching ads as a hobby, and I had committed to studying business because I thought that's so broad, I can do anything with that. And then a lady from Unilever came in for one of the marketing lectures, and I was like, oh my God, I just want to be you when I'm growing up. And I thought, you know, a marketing career in the FMCG, the fast moving consumer goods industry, that's totally me. And I did that for the next 10 years of my, I always call it first career. And I progressed so quickly because, you know, coming from a very entrepreneurial, old-fashioned family, you just outwork everyone. And I could do that because I don't mind working long hours. And especially when I came to Australia, it was quite easy for me to kind of overtake others. So I landed in a very senior role before the age of 30, and I didn't quite realize that the higher you climb, the more you have to influence, the more you have to communicate, the more stakeholder management is important. But I just focused on doing more of what I've done. I worked hard and took on all the projects. And my manager called me into her office on a Friday and said, let's go for lunch. And I was like, must be time for my next promotion, clearly. Like, you know, what else could she talk to me about?
I love
and,
this.
and, you know, I was like 29 or something. So I was like, what am I doing for the weekend to celebrate that? Anyway, she put me on a performance improvement plan. I was like, oh, so not quite what I expected. And I said, but how comes? Like, I'm literally the first in, last out. I look after all the projects. And she said, yeah, we see that. Like, you definitely outwork everyone. But you are looking after 18 boards back then. You are looking after stakeholder management, and you are not able to influence at that level that we need you to influence. You don't enable your team to do the doing. You are still doing the doing, but you're not actually doing your job. And, you know, because it was still a small team, and that was quite a long time ago now, like 11 years nearly, I didn't have any external feedback or coaching or somebody pointing out the blind spots. Like, everyone just walked over each other, tried to get ahead. And I thought the way how I get ahead is by doing more of what I've done. Little did I know that got me to that stage, and then was exactly the detriment to not getting any further. And that bruised my ego. Not a little, but a lot. I was like, I'm not good enough for marketing. I need to get out of it. And I was speaking to a recruiter to get to my next job because, you know, even though people say when you're on a performance improvement plan, it's an opportunity to improve. In my case, it was a very toxic environment. I knew they just wanted to get rid of me. And I was like, I'm going before they kick me out. I also got divorced that month, like, you know, speaking of when things happen. And I was like, I need to make whatever the next step is work because I need to pay my own bills. I don't have a safety blanket. And I spoke to a recruiter and she said, have you thought about marketing recruitment? And I was like, no, why would I? And I walked away. Anyway, I spoke to a friend on that weekend and she said, oh yeah, I'm doing recruitment and I love it because what you have to do is you have to speak to people, you have to map out their career, you have to build relationships. I was like, that sounds pretty amazing. So let me have a look at that. And I got into recruitment with the caveat after getting rejected by every agency in Brisbane because I didn't have that recruitment experience. I got into the very last agency that was on offer and they said, you know, we see something in you. You can start with us under the premise that you are starting a completely new desk. And that's digital and technology. Apparently it's a thing. You know, not that long ago, it was not a big thing. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And, you know, literally coming not from a tech background, I Googled everything. What does SEO mean? And asked all the candidates that I could find who wanted to speak to me, how they got into their profession, how they actually learned. Because back then there was not a traditional education path where you could actually educate yourself. So I just ask a lot of questions. And I spoke to a lot of senior leaders and CEOs and CFOs. And because I didn't come from this tech background, I simply became that translator, which I didn't realize. And I said, you want to build a business doing X, Y, Z? Well, Johnny over there, he's done already A, B, C, and he could do that also for you. Like, this is literally how I spoke. Very basic, non-technical, and I placed over 300 candidates in less than 2 years. And that's a lot of people. And I literally worked 24/7, which was, okay, when you're early 30s, you're single, you do whatever. But then I thought, what if there is a method or a framework that I can teach my candidates back then, this is how it started, how they can clarify what makes them unique, how then they can communicate to their decision maker why they should choose them, and they can commercialize their expertise either through a more senior role, through a board engagement, or their own business. And this is how impaCCCt actually was born. So very much out of necessity and the realization that extremely smart professionals could not get ahead in their career simply because they were not able to articulate why somebody should choose them. And now, especially over the last 3-4 years, where entrepreneurship has become a lot bigger topic and more executives stepping into the entrepreneurial world because the whole economic landscape is changing, it has proven to be quite the right decision.
I know, it's so incredible. And I know Karen will want to dig deeper, but because you just mentioned impaCCCt, and I just realized I didn't actually mention that in your intro at all, which is a big faux pas. I need to ask you to please tell the listeners a little bit about impaCCCt.
Absolutely. Now, impact was also born of the necessity of asking people, my candidates, it all started in the recruitment world. I asked 20-year-olds, so what do you want to do in your next job? And I asked the same question to 50-plus-year-olds. And everyone said, I don't know, but I want to make an impact. I was like, what does it even mean? Like for a 20-year-old, it's like earning 80 grand. For a 50-year-old, it's leaving a legacy. There's not one definition. But I thought if they can clarify what they actually want and why somebody should choose them, then they can communicate it confidently. And with that, they can commercialize what they can actually bring to a table. And this is why impact with the 3 C's has actually come about.
And just quickly, the 3 C's. What are the 3 C's?
Clarify, communicate, commercialize.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Petra, it's very clear that you do some amazing work to amplify, the skill sets of the people that you're connected with. As you well know, we do love hearing about the highs, but you also mentioned the lowest of the lows, and I'd love to dive into those a little bit. Like as you were speaking, I was like, I feel as though I can gauge a couple here. Just from an outsider looking in, I was thinking, all right, even going on a performance review, for some people that would be really difficult. That might feel like the lowest of lows. The rejection from several companies as you were trying to engage with them for work, or maybe it was even like that confidence factor in not having the vocab that other people did have when you actually landed work. But what were some of the lowest of the lows? Maybe talk us through maybe one or two of those scenarios for yourself.
There were plenty, and even now there is so it sounds horrible, but I think entrepreneurship is eating the sandwich, because 98% of what you do is hard work. You get rejection one after the other, but the 2% that you also do light you up so much that the 98% of the work doesn't really count. So starting my business, I got one rejection after the other too. Plus, all of a sudden, I didn't come from the hands-on marketing background. I was in marketing, but I had teams by the time I was senior enough, so I didn't actually do anything. I briefed agencies, I briefed my teams, I approved things, but I wasn't hands-on with anything. So what I realized was that I had such a big skill gap in terms of copywriting, in terms of setting up websites, in terms of creating social media content. So at the beginning, I didn't have any income either. So I hustled during the day. I cold, I had meetings, I had coffees, and then at night I watched YouTube tutorials. I enrolled in online courses and just literally how to, and then tried to put it in practice into the actual software, whatever I've downloaded that day. And gosh, there were days where I thought, why am I doing this? I should just go back to a corporate role, and I can easily recruit all day, every day. I can do that. So that was one low, that I simply didn't get any traction for such a long time because I had to learn so many skills to actually make that business work. And to be honest, entrepreneurship, I think it keeps you humble. Let's just put it that way. Like the last 3 years, finally I thought, it's flying. Everything is smoother, it gets easier. COVID hit, bang, back in your box. I was like, okay, great.
Yeah.
Nobody hired, nobody did coaching. There was just a standstill. I wasn't set up to an online environment either, so that was a bit of a challenge. And even the last 2-3 years, I also work with investor groups to help entrepreneurs get funding and then build their business. The last 3 years, you could get money for anything and any idea. In the last year especially, everyone is questioning everything, and the funding is tighter and decisions take longer. And you think, oh my gosh, what just happened? Am I still relevant? Is the message still relevant? Is the offer still relevant? There is no time where you say, you know what, I made it. No such thing, because then entrepreneurship kicks you back. Is like, think again, because economy is slowing down, or, it's just, there's so many learnings along the way, which then at the same time, when you've got a win, it makes the win so much more worth it. And this is, I think, what keeps us going.
Interesting you say that. And I'm thinking, Karen and I are listening to this. I don't know how our listeners feel right now, but if there are any entrepreneurs, solopreneurs amongst our listeners, if I were them, I would probably be looking for work this afternoon and just try and get out of entrepreneurship straight away.
I'm selling Petra, the dream, huh?
I know, you're really selling it. And it's like, I don't know at this point whether the 2% really convinced me.
You'd want to be a very good 2%.
I know, like how good can they be? But so tell us then, you are so resilient, I think, with the way you constantly reinvent yourself, create new programs, create new products, offering services. It's amazing what you seem to pump out. What is it that helps you cope in those times where investors seem to question everything and everyone, where, you know, business doesn't seem to go your way?
I think it's literally the drive for not wanting to be in the same position that I was when I was in corporate, and I didn't see that coming, that they pulled the rug underneath my feet. I never want to be at the mercy of an external factor, whether I'm successful or safe or, you know, happy at all. And I've let that happen for, you know, pretty much the first part of my career, for the first 10 years, because I thought, also coming from Europe, you just work hard. You don't need to enjoy work. You work hard, somebody will recognize you, eventually you get a pay rise, and then you retire. Like, that was kind of the mindset. And then I realized when I got into recruitment, which I really was thriving in, actually, I really enjoyed doing it, that there is a different way of having a career, that you can actually get up in the morning and look forward to going to work and not dreading it and having sweat attacks at night and putting on weight because you're so stressed. And this is exactly the same thing. Like, I can now be scared and worried about the economy and politics and slower buying cycles, but I can't control it. So why would I even bother focusing on that? The only thing that I can focus on is how I respond to it. And I always say, if it's slow, double down. Like, I'm going hard in the next months before the end of the, before people are coming back from holidays and so forth, because everyone says, oh, nobody makes decisions, nobody's here. Why would you even bother? Because when people are here, you actually the one they are choosing. So I think this is the biggest motivation, to not let any external factors determine my level of success, happiness, and how far I get to.
I love that.
Yeah, there's some beautiful pieces in there, Petra, and I think we'll probably dive into some aspects of this in our post interview here around how different communities around the world perceive what work looks like and whether or not we should enjoy work. You know, it's that notion of collectivist versus individualist communities, which is really exciting. But so thank you for opening Pandora's box for us there. But I really love this. You know, the way that you sort of speak quite passionately about, you know, just is a little bit of the hustle, like, let's find the next thing, let's continue to have that drive. And I love the energy that you're bringing to the conversation here. I'm trying to understand a little bit more about where this is all coming from. I can understand the desire not to want to be fueled or not to be in a situation again where somebody's like questioning your work. But I'm wondering, has there been some people along the way in your journey that have like really influenced the way in which you operate? Because I get the feeling that you've worked with some amazing people in your time. Has there been some pivotal moments in your career where you've gone, that's amazing, I'm going to carry that with me into my future work?
Absolutely. I think it actually started a lot earlier, before I got into a career. It started when I was a child, because my dad, he's quite tough. Like, he's lovely, but he's very Austrian. Let's put it that way.
And for our listeners that may not be familiar, for our listeners that may not be familiar with what that means.
Yeah.
There's no sugarcoating. There is no, like, I've got an older brother, and my dad always ran his own businesses, and they were furniture businesses. So he furnished universities, and we are talking about like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 chairs and desks. So since the age of 12 years, I had to work with him during the holidays every day for at least 8 hours, and 2 hours driving usually each way, getting paid like 50 euros for a full week, if that. And there was no slacking off. Like, just because I was a girl didn't mean I couldn't carry as much as the boys did. So I was always very much in this masculine environment, and I also wanted to do it. And also at the same time, school was never easy for me. I was always struggling at school, literally since the day I got into school to the day I left. It was never easy for me, and everything just was a struggle. And my dad said, oh, sweetie, you're not smart enough to go to university, so maybe hairdressing is a good profession for you.
Me so angry.
And I know, but I was like, you know what? Why would I take his opinion for granted? I'm just working my backside off, and then I'll show you. Plus, I was also very overweight as child. And, back in the 80s when you grew up, there is no such thing as anti-bullying. You were bullied and there was, no sugarcoating. So everyone, when we were exercising and we had PE and we had to jump over this, bock, I'm not actually sure what it's called
obstacle
in German.
Or whatever, yeah.
The obstacle, exactly. Out of the 19 students that we were, I was always the only one who couldn't get over it. And the kids back then were like, oh, you fat cow and you fat pig, and and even the teachers said, oh, are you still not able to jump over it? You better lose some weight. Like, there was so much bullying from parents, from kids and all of that. And I was just always so embarrassed. And I always imagined, one day I'm so sporty, I can outperform anyone. And this was always my driver, because there was nothing in my life that came easy for me. I always had to work very hard on everything. And I think I just wanted to prove everyone wrong that I can do it. And then I graduated with a master's in less than 4 years, which was less than minimum time back then. And my dad said when I graduated, oh, so you're not as dumb as I thought you were.
Gosh.
Wow.
But yeah, I think those milestones just form how you approach life.
Oh,
Yeah,
100%. You go.
Yeah, and I think that we had a guest from a previous season, Seth Fontaine-Pinnock, was talking about sometimes we have to have those experiences in order to be able to grow and successful. And there's lots of people that talk about successful CEOs that have had sort of adverse childhood experiences that have helped form and shape the way in which they manage difficult situations. So it's interesting to hear, and I'm sorry, as an educator too, I'm very sorry to hear that you had those experiences in school. No child should ever face that from either their peers or educators. But it is interesting that you've been able to use that as fuel. That's sort of, it sounds like it's been a part of like this flame that's been ignited, because now you have this amazing energy and it really drives you with your creativity and your work ethic as well.
Yeah, I think so too, because in the end, it comes down to what you do with it. Like, my brother is literally the opposite. Whereas I'm always future focused and say, I can't change what happened yesterday. I want to know and work towards what's happening tomorrow. Whereas to this day, he says, remember what happened in 1992? I wouldn't even know what I had for breakfast. Like, no. And he holds on to all that grunge rather than working forward. Wow. And this is, what I've never understood. So,
yeah.
they're all
and
different.
It's so true. You are so future focused and you are so solution focused, and always taking action towards solutions. Is incredible to watch you work, the little bit that I can see. I would love to know what lessons you might have taken away from all these experiences, maybe some lessons you have learned for yourself, and then also perhaps after that we can talk about maybe some pieces of advice you might want to give our listeners.
Oh, so many lessons. I think the biggest lesson is that nobody's coming to save you, and nobody's as interested in your success than you are. And, so long, especially in my corporate career when I was still finding my feet, I just always hoped for somebody else to tell me how good I am and then promotes me. And I was never the person who advocated for myself. I thought my hard work will speak for itself. And, as much as it was not a thing back then, it's not a thing now either. So if you're not saying and advocate for yourself what it actually is that you want to do, and even if there's a gap between now and then, being able to address it, to say, what do I need to do to get there? This is something that we all, I think, have to learn a lot more. So rather than having a pity party and say, nobody wants to buy from me, or nobody wants to hire me, or, whatever it might be, it's like, what can I do to get there? It may not be tomorrow, but it may be in 6 months. So this is probably the biggest lesson. And then the other lesson would be that you very much, and it sounds very cliche, but you're very much the product of the people, not just necessarily the physical people, but the environment that you create for yourself, physical and the digital environment. And, I was actually exposed to Joseph Murphy's The Law of the Universe, very early on, like I was literally 8 or 9 years. And even though I didn't quite understand it, I thought there is something bigger than me. And that shaped me also in that way. So I think, curating your environment with people who are ahead, who inspire you, who teach you something, who drag you out, who challenge your thinking, and not just always saying, oh, are you sure you want to do this? That sounds risky or expensive. But saying, you know what, you want to double it. Why not 100x it? Yeah, completely blow your mind. That's the kind of people I want to hang out with. And so many people are in environments where others do not want them to grow because that makes them feel really bad. And to be honest, simply moving from Austria to Australia has enabled me a completely different life that I would not be able to live in Austria. And even now, moving from Brisbane to the Gold Coast, I'm entering a next chapter, and this physical move is quite deliberate because the environment that you're in is shaping how much you grow or not. So I think this is something that we all have to be very mindful. If our physical and mental environment is suitable for the next chapter that we are entering, not necessarily where we are right now, because this got us here, but to this next stage.
Ooh, there's a lot of that future focus goodness coming out there that you were speaking about, Micah, which I really love. But you've actually touched on one of my favourite quotes, and I say this a lot in my workshops. People are subjects to the environments that they're exposed to, and I think that from early on we don't necessarily have much control over what that looks like. But as we grow older, hopefully we're able to use the experiences and people around us to help inform and create a better space for us to grow and thrive. And as you know, that's the space that Micah and I love to work in. Like, what does that environment look like around us? So I love that you mentioned that as a sort of like follow on from your lessons, because that was kind of, I don't know if that was intentional, if that was your bit of advice, but I think it was a lovely bit. It was a very, very lovely piece there.
Nowadays where we've got access to technology, there is no excuse to not have access to some of the biggest and brightest minds in history, like live or dead. So if we're not tapping into that, what are we doing? Back when we didn't have technology, like even though it was a lovely time too, when we didn't have social media all day, every day, didn't have the comparisonitis that we've got now. Back then, you were also exposed to this tiny little bubble that your parents, your family, and your friends lived. And I grew up in a very small country town. There was not even traffic lights. Like, that's how small it was. There was one church, and that was it. And that's absolutely. And every single person from my high school, they are all married. They have all kids, and they're all not quite visible, but quite visible.
You're listening.
Hi.
I'm sure that wasn't the advice part there, Petra.
No, but they've never left their bubble. So the only thing, and this is also how I imagined my future. You go to university, you get married, you get the house, you get kids, and then you work in your job, and then you retire. There was no other life or world that I could have imagined myself to be in, because nobody lived it. So how could I live that ever?
It's a really good point around challenging societal norms and expectations there. So I love that, and I think Michael might have wanted to jump in. I've just got one quick question for you. What would you say to someone that finds themselves stuck in that rut and trying to break out of that? They've acknowledged that, hey, I want a little bit more, but I don't know what to do. Like, what's a little bit of gold that you could pass on to them?
And can I add on to that question? What if someone is literally stuck in their little country town as well and can't really leave, their town, their country, whatever? What if that's not possible for them? What would you say to them as well?
That is such a good question. And I, in my 40-something years, I've always been very visionary. But the last probably 4 or 5 months, I was literally in that same space and was stuck all of a sudden, and I didn't see what's next, and I didn't know what I want to do. And the only thing that I did was a lot of activities, quite random activities too, from talking to random people, but also very selective people. So not being focused on only my circle, but simply talking to people to say, this is what's going on, this is what I've experienced, this is where I'm at, and just getting insights and small nuggets from different people to piece together my own reality and what that actually means to me. But then also taking a lot of action, like just often we get stuck in this analysis paralysis state where we're just overthinking everything, and with that we're not doing anything. Whereas I did everything at the same time, a lot of random stuff, from enrolling in courses. Like I've enrolled like in 4 courses. None of them I've actually opened really, but it was just it was just kind of the, oh my God, I need to do something. And I joined a different gym. We started looking for apartments. We even moved already, which was not planned for another 2 years. Like everything happened so fast, simply because when you are in motion, you get the momentum. And this is also probably what I learned. So rather than hoping for the motivation to kick in and the inspiration to just fly, you need to move physically and mentally to get the momentum, and then you can pivot, because we don't know if something is good or bad when it's just in our head. Because usually people have this romantic idea of something: running your own business, becoming a speaker, writing a book, all romantic ideas. But how many people do actually know what goes in all of that, and how many people are prepared to commit to that lifestyle that goes into getting the result versus just wanting the result? 2 different things.
Oh, hard agree. Absolutely. Were you going to add something onto that?
Yes, coming back to your question, when somebody's stuck in a country town, I'm sorry. But at the same time, it's also about, exploring what's is available there. And often we don't realize how many opportunities, how many communities, how many clubs there are in different interest groups, in different even just a few suburbs further. It's usually completely different vibes. So getting out of your little bubble also helps. Same with moving, simply going for walks, like it does wonders. With my partner for the last nearly 9 years, we walk every day and we talk. We literally solve the world's problems. And I think this is an underrated activity, to simply talk a lot with your life partner, with a friend, because this is how you actually articulate what's happening in your own head. And often when we are brewing our own ideas and then somebody asks us and we can't even say what we actually want, of course we are not getting it. So simply trying things on and see if it fits, and if not, we can take it off again. I think this is something that we can all explore further. Plus there is an online world that we have access to, so joining the relevant groups, listening to amazing podcasts where you get inspiration, and connecting with people on social media platforms to have conversations there, we've got the opportunity, so why not use it?
Amazing, very practical pieces of advice you're sharing there. Absolutely love it. Thank you so much. I would love for you to share with our listeners what you're currently working on, whether you have a service, a new product, something on the go, because obviously we're going to link to all your socials and your website in the show notes, and you're welcome to mention them as well. But is there anything you've got brewing at the moment that you're working on and are excited to share?
Well, what I've also realized with the economy is changing, and with more people are stepping out of corporate, whether they want to do it or there's redundancy or whatever reason there may be, their trusted authority framework on how you can actually systemize, package, and then monetize your IP needs to be accessible to more than just one-on-one coaching clients. So over the last 3 years, I've literally just done agency service level execution, meaning everything was done for clients, and now we are offering a do it with you and do it yourself model. So it's more learning the relevant content, putting it into practice, getting feedback, and being part of a curated community rather than just having one-on-one, even though I love one-on-one because I think you get so much more out with being very deep, being very personal, but it's not for everyone either. So I think, simply challenging how you can actually offer a result to a wider or a different audience often reinvigorates and revitalizes a business and prepares us for this next chapter. And we also need to respond to economic changes. So yeah, trusted-authority.co is the place where everyone can find everything.
Oh, amazing. And it sounds like it's really, you spoke a little bit before about closing skill gaps. I feel as though that's going to be an integral part of closing many other people's skill gaps, Petra. So it's a lovely service that you're providing will provide to so many people. So I can't wait to sort of look into that and explore that a little bit more. This has been such a lovely conversation. I've got so many like little reminders, little things that like sparked my interest, and I'm like, oh, now I need to go and look at this again. Oh, Petra mentioned that. That's it's given me lots of like homework to do as a result of this conversation, which I absolutely love because I love a conversation that puts me in a bit of a reflective space. And I think my big take homes from this little conversation that we've had today is the importance of networking, connecting with people, but then taking action from that. There's no point being in a room full of really smart people if we don't do anything with that knowledge. So thank you for that wisdom there, but thank you, and I'm sure our listeners will really appreciate your time as well. So we really appreciate you joining us today, Petra, and good luck with all your future ventures.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast. You guys are amazing.
Thank you so much, Petra.
Alrighty, we jump back into the post-show, Micah, and another amazing chat. I mean, Petra, I know you know Petra quite well, but I'll tell you what, she really brought a wealth of experience and knowledge to this conversation today, didn't she?
Oh, absolutely. And she really is such an experienced entrepreneur, and she's such a powerhouse, and she works so hard all the time. So she's an incredible inspiration to me, and I loved being able to have her on the show.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful conversation, and I feel as though there were so many different insights that she shared there. And, as someone who grew up in a regional area that was on that journey of trying to make it, I was sort of like, oh, yeah, I really love this. Like, notion of trying to, connect myself with better people, more experienced people, more knowledgeable people, and almost sort of breaking free from that little circle. I found that, really, really fascinating. I'm not too sure if that was something that you sort of picked up on as well.
100%, and I guess this is something she highlighted throughout the chat, didn't she? The impact of one's environment on our personal and professional growth. And I think this is something we see and hear all the time. The whole idea of you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most, or something like that. And just how important it is to create a supportive environment if you want to really grow and accelerate and grow beyond yourself and what you think might be possible for yourself. So I thought also that was really interesting, and I'm always fascinated by that. Those kinds of studies.
I have to feel really sorry for my friends here. I feel as though if they're the average of the 5 people that they surround themselves with, I'm maybe holding them back a little bit.
I know. Yeah, there's always that one. I know.
It's me. It's me in the group.
Apologies also to my friends.
I'm the outlier on the opposite side, I think, sometimes.
Well, I guess I live the average, level of partying in my circle of friends, I think. So, we all, we all contribute our bit. But I think it's interesting because, yes, it's 100% is so important in the entrepreneurial world. But it's also, I think, you can notice it really well also within workplaces, right? And I mean, I know that a lot of our listeners are also leaders within workplaces. And, I think sometimes we just think about it almost like too directly in terms of we are the average of the whatever, how many people we spend the most time with. But in workplaces, for example, we talk a lot about psychological safety, for example, right? Or how productive we are, how engaged we are. Well, all of that depends on the workplace culture, right? The people around us determine how safe we feel to make mistakes, for example, or to what extent we feel we are given a benefit of the doubt. It all depends on the actions of the people around us. So I think, this is definitely something to highlight from our chat with Petra.
Yeah, absolutely. And that notion, I love that you lent into talking a lot about the culture there because, I've worked in like several big teams and several smaller teams and then large organisations too. And if that culture's not right, like the productivity can just swindle away really easily, right? The energy goes and people's enthusiasm, their ability or their desire to even want to lean in and do that little bit extra or do it with a bit of extra heart, like it goes when the culture goes.
100%.
And, that investment in your time and your people is so, so critical. And I think that, it's often overlooked when we have people that really become quite focused on performance or making more money. It's like, we're going to do that, but often it's at the expense of culture. We're going to cut costs, we're going to cut corners, we're going to lay people off, whatever it be. And culture goes, and culture is very easy to nurture, or much easier to nurture in a small team. When it gets bigger and you got more people on board, obviously more difficult and becomes more complex. because people bring their own subcultures into that space, right? But that being said, it requires intentional action to sort of be on top of it, doesn't it?
100%. I'm just a little bit conscious of time here, and there's just one other point I really wanted to highlight, because it's something that I often highlight to other people who are feeling a little bit down, who are feeling helpless, hopeless, a little bit in distress. And it's something Petra said. She said, nobody's coming to save you. And I know this sounds super harsh, and it's not really, maybe the way I would articulate it because it sounds so harsh, but it's a good eye-opener. Because it is so important that when we feel like we're stuck or we feel a little bit hopeless or something like that, that we take responsibility for our own fate, if you will, in the first place. Because no one helps you if you don't help yourself. And this is something that really stuck with me when I even, in my undergrad from social psychology, because there are some studies that show that there are sort of right or wrong ways to be hoping or asking for help. And there's actually a recent study about this by Forrest and colleagues, published in 2021. It's called Facilitating Motivating Support, How Support Seekers Can Affect the Support They Receive in Times of Distress. So this is a really good quality, it's a systematic review, so really good quality scientific paper published in Social and Personality Psychology Compass that just shows that the way we ask for help really influences the extent to which we receive that help. And there were three main conclusions I thought might be nice to highlight here because I find this super helpful for anyone, and I use this myself. So first of all, has to do with self-advocacy. So the study showed that support seekers who communicate their needs clearly and directly are more likely to receive effective and helpful support. And that kind of makes sense, I guess, because often we assume that other people know exactly what we need or that they see what we need, but no one can read our minds and no one can really, look into our situation as much as we know. So if we can communicate that clearly and directly, that is really helpful. The second conclusion had to do with positive versus negative expressions. So it showed that those who express distress in a constructive and mindful way, so without just being chronically negative about this, tend to elicit more responsive support than those who sort of overexpress their distress and negativity, because that can really be demotivating for potential helpers. Everybody has their own worries and so forth. And I think if we are so negative about communicating the way we are affected by the negative things in our lives, I think that can really turn people off offering help. And the third conclusion was that there is, it just showed that people who take proactive steps in addressing their own issues by themselves and demonstrate effort in solving their own problems are also more likely to receive that support from others. So I just think this is super helpful to know, because people usually are very motivated to help, but it just makes a difference in how we ask for that help.
Yeah, so essentially what we're saying here, if I'm a listener here going, all right, I've got these things that I know that I need to work on, I kind of want to move out of that situation. I don't want to be the person that's dragging my the top 5 of my friends down. Ways in which I can go about this proactively is to actively look for ways in which I can advance and improve. And do that in a more positive light. And I resonate with this too. We always have those people that we know those people that can suck the fun out of things and aren't as joyful to be around. But if I'm as someone looking to improve, I sort of need to outwardly progress that in a positive way. Is that what you're sort of saying here as far as like an approach?
Absolutely. Yeah. Somehow show that you are also trying to help yourself out of the situation. Don't just focus on the negative stuff, but, also focus on some of the positives. Don't overemphasize how sad and distressing your situation is, but be more solutions focused. I know this is sometimes easier said than done. And the third one is communicate clearly and directly what it is that you need help with.
Love this. And this actually relates back a little bit to what I used to do in my work when I was working in schools. I loved it when people came advice seeking instead of help seeking. So this was the notion, and people will know this from my teams that worked with me. The most ideal way to come in and approach a challenge with me was to say, this is the situation, this is what I'm thinking is a possible solution. Can I get your feedback on it?
Exactly. Right. Isn't that the perfect way to do that? And show
I know.
that you've already put
it.
some thought into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I was always more excited and more energized to help those people because they'd put some thought in, they'd come prepared, and they just wanted some extra advice. They just wanted to make sure it was a sound approach as opposed to, this has happened, what do I do?
Exactly.
Yeah, the world's coming to an end.
It feels like it feels like a better investment of your own brain power and resources too, doesn't it? When you know this person is already trying to help themselves, because you know there's a learning curve. Every time they try to help themselves, they'll become better at this, and it just resonates with me because we do the same with our children too. When they ask for help, we go, okay, what do you think? Always asking them, what do you think first? To try and stimulate that growth and those thought processes.
That's a really solid point to sort of try and capture it nice and early, and things that we could be doing even with our children. That's a nice little thought too. And just on this note, I do want to highlight, as a leader, it does take some work to have your team members coming to you in that mindset. It's not like it just happens overnight, or some people will naturally be a bit that way inclined, but as a leader, you can actually create that environment for your team members and say, hey, this is how I love it. I would love it if we work in this manner. I'd love it if you were using me as somebody to guide and support you as opposed to solving your problems.
I love that.
Yeah. So I just want to highlight, if you're sitting there going, well, I'm frustrated my team members don't do this. As leaders, we can actually do some work there in creating that culture.
100%. So much of my work with coaching clients centers around communicating our expectations clearly and directly. It doesn't have to be confrontational. It makes all the difference if we do that. So I love that you highlighted that here.
Yeah, lovely. And I feel as though we were probably, even though our client bases can be quite different at times, I feel as though the essence of what we're trying to do in that space of leadership is very similar, right?
Very similar.
It's very much based around that empowering model and supporting those people. And it's this beautiful, hybrid mix of different leadership styles, I think. I've spoken about those leadership styles before, and I'm a big believer in that we need to contextualise them for our space and find that nice hybridisation of what works well for us and the person that we are.
I agree.
Lovely. Anything else from that one, Micah, or we...
I think we're good. I mean, if you ask me to, I can go on and on. I'm just a little bit mindful of time for our listeners.
No, not a trouble at all. Look, that was a beautiful conversation with Petra, and I do feel as though we could go on and on and on there. My only other 2 points that I'd written down here was, that notion to remain curious about learning more, which leans nicely into what you said, and continue to network too. And I think that's maybe how our core 5 people might shift in time too. As we continue to evolve our network, we'll find that new people move into that top 5 or that core 5. So it's a great way 100%. To move ourselves out of that. And if we use it as a metaphor, move ourselves out of that small town position into a bigger and brighter future.
And Petra is a great networker herself, and she's a great connector. And in fact, at the moment, I don't know if she will still have this for a while, but at the moment she's offering services to, help people network and bring lots of, high profile leaders together. So yes, most certainly something she models as well.
Yeah, and really leans into it. Yeah, and I think that's probably part of the reason why I've written that one down. So a really beautiful insight there. Well, as always, Micah, thank you so much for a lovely conversation post-show. You brought some great insights in. We are heading towards the end of the season now, but we've still got a couple more amazing guests that are well worth having a bit of a listen to from very different walks of life, I guess. But I'm going to provide some really fascinating insights to wrap up our season. So, as always, thanks for listening in, everyone. Take care, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We hope our conversation helped normalize the struggles so many of us face on the path to success. While on the outside things often look like sunshine and rainbows, this is rarely the experience for anyone behind the facade.
But instead of letting that demotivate you, we hope it does the exact opposite. To let it fuel you to keep pursuing your purpose and realize your potential. Just without the added burden of feeling inadequate and a little more patience, some tips, and self-compassion instead. For further info, head to our website, flourishingunfiltered.com, and get in touch with us via our socials, @flourishingunfiltered.
Now, if you or someone you know is struggling with feelings of loneliness, low mental health, or suicidal thoughts, please know that there are people who care and treatments that can help. We've compiled some helplines for you in the show notes.
It's a wrap for Flourishing Unfiltered today. Please give us a follow and leave us a comment and a review. We hope you tune in next time.